There's a ruin high up on the moors here in West Yorkshire that's said to have inspired Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights. And for decades now, thousands of people have been making the journey here to see it. But is it really true? Well, there's one detail that throws a spanner in the works of this whole story. And as we travel across the moors and towards the ruin here, I want to show you what's left of it and tell you about this missing puzzle piece that's just one of several controversies tied to this landscape that many now know as the Brontë Moors. Let's go and see what's out there. Now, many of you watching this will know of the Brontës, even if just by name. But if you're thinking, who's that? Well, don't worry. I'm going to fill you in on everything you need to know. Even if you've never read the novels of any of the Brontë sisters, you'll probably have come across some of the cultural influences they've had, from music to paintings to stories. Kate Bush's Wuthering Heights probably being one of the most far-reaching influences. Now, as it happens, Wuthering Heights is the novel that we're most interested today for this particular puzzle. It was written almost 180 years ago by Emily Brontë, first published in 1847 under her pseudonym Ellis Bell. All three of the Brontë sisters initially published under male pseudonyms, but they retained the initials of their real names. Emily became Ellis, Charlotte became Currer, and Anne became Acton. And when Wuthering Heights was first released, Emily was just 29 years old. It was her first published novel, and it would end up being her last published novel, because unfortunately she died the following year. And so she never got to see the impact and the worldwide legacy that her work would go on to create. All four of the Brontë siblings had a rough ride in many senses and a very short life. They were already the four surviving siblings of six, the three sisters and their brother Branwell, and the family first moved to Haworth in 1820, when it was a far cry from the touristic village that's there today. Haworth in those days, in the 1800s, had incredibly poor sanitation standards, high levels of disease, very low average life expectancy, and none of this being helped by the fact that the drinking water was being contaminated by the church's graveyard at the top of the hill. So you might be wondering, well, what's the connection with the place we're heading to when it comes to Wuthering Heights then, and the Brontës in general? Well, the village of Haworth is about 1.5 miles behind me right now, and the Brontës were well known in their lifetime to have travelled on foot around much of the local landscape. We've got the moorland to our left, which we're going to see more of shortly. Lots of farmland in the background here on our right hand side. Plenty of sheep. Now, because of the adventurous nature of the Brontës and the many miles they covered on foot in the local area, it's believed that the moorland around here served as a heavy inspiration for much of their writings, including our destination today, which is the ruins of a farmhouse known as Top Withens. Now, Top Withens was one of three farmhouses which sat within, I guess, what we could call the Withens farmstead. There was Lower Withens, Middle Withens and Top Withens, three farmhouses. Two of those no longer exist, but Top Withens, at least partially, is still there. And you'll see what I mean when we get there. Hello, sheeps. Now, we've not been here for very long, but you can already start to understand how this kind of landscape could have very easily inspired the writings of the sisters. That in itself, by no means a far-fetched claim. There's plenty of evidence to support it. But with this particular ruin, things are a little bit more murky. Like I said, Emily passed away, unfortunately, the year following on from the first publication of Wuthering Heights in 1847. And no records have ever been found whereby Emily has confirmed herself that Top Withens was the inspiration for Wuthering Heights. So where did that connection come from? Well, a large part of this association is thanks to a man named George Smith. He was a publisher, and in 1872, quite a long time after Emily's passing, he was preparing to publish some new editions of the sisters' novels, including Wuthering Heights. And as part of this, he commissioned some illustrations to accompany the novels. To help out with these illustrations, he got in touch with a woman named Ellen Nussey. Now, Ellen had been a lifelong friend of the Brontës, Charlotte Brontë, one of the other sisters in particular, and throughout her lifetime had exchanged hundreds of letters with Charlotte. And whilst none of Ellen's letters to Charlotte survived, there's a whole other story there, many of Charlotte's responses did. And they are still around to this day, a lot of them in museum collections. And so we know that George wrote to Ellen to ask her if she'd ever spoken with the sisters about specific and direct inspirations behind locations within the novels. Ellen received the letter and replied. But here's the problem. We don't know what she wrote back. In fact, the only reason we know that Ellen replied to George is because we have records of George's following response to her saying, "Thank you, thanks for the information," but we don't know what she sent to him. Nevertheless, a year later, in 1873, the book was released, accompanied by an illustration. I'm just getting windy up here. And in the illustration, there were 3 farmhouses sat on the moorland, representing lower, middle and top Withens. Now, lower and middle Withens kind of looked pretty much as they did in the real landscape. Smallish, modest farmhouses. Top Withens, however, looked a little bit different because it had been illustrated based on the description of the home within the book. Now, that missing response from Ellen has led to some disagreements into how valid this location is. How confident can we be that this was particular and direct inspiration for Emily? And you could easily say, well, you've been very pedantic here. It seems pretty likely. And yeah, I suppose I am in a sense. But it's this very reason, a small amount of very significant information that's missing, that holds back experts in this subject, not me, real experts, from saying definitively yes. Top Withens was the inspiration. Oh, we've got a sign here too. Public footpath to Top Withens via Brontë waterfall. Now we're going to see some very interesting wording that's on a plaque when we get to the ruins. And regardless of this small amount of ambiguity in the history and the association here, nevertheless, Top Withens has become somewhat of a destination and part of a pilgrimage for Brontë fans for many, many years now. And this is where we get into the other side of the controversy that surrounds these hills. After the Brontes' lifetime, their books just grew and grew and grew in popularity. They reached worldwide fame and attracted a global, dedicated fan base. And as a result, the quaint village of Haworth started to attract tourists. And I've been through as many records as I could find from different time periods to try and piece this together, but I came across a number of opinions from maybe a small number of locals. I couldn't really tell you, but some people who at the time, particularly throughout the 90s it seems, when tourist numbers were rising, were not too happy about it. Footpaths were being laid, multilingual signposts erected, bridges constructed, all to make the moorland more accessible. And I had to really try and put myself in the shoes of somebody who may have lived here before that time and maybe had a longer history here in Haworth. And I suppose if you knew the landscape and this was your home before all of this Brontë fever, you might not be the biggest fan of all of these changes. Obviously a great thing for visitors and fans of the novels, but from that perspective it could feel like the moors were changing and becoming less and less like the landscape that inspired the Brontes from that time. I mean, having said all that, you can see how dramatic the landscape is here, even to this day. I couldn't quite figure out how widespread these opinions were. Was it just a handful of people? So I would be curious to know, for anybody who maybe is from or used to live in Haworth, was this a common feeling back then? Because during the times I've been lucky enough to visit Haworth and the moors here in my adult lifetime, it's been in a period well after Brontë fever has swept the world. That's not to say that the fan base has waned necessarily, but the changes to the landscape and the high number of tourists here were already present. And what some refer to as kind of brontification of Haworth had already taken place. You know, you can even go to one of the pubs at the top of the old cobbled street in Haworth and you can buy beers named after the Brontë family. you can get a pint of, Anne Brontë pale ale. And I'm not criticising it. It's not my hometown, and it obviously is a great thing for local business. And it's a village I can very easily recommend visiting. Now we're about to pass by Brontë Waterfall, said to be another favoured spot of the Brontë sisters. And then I think as we navigate past this water flow here, we should be approaching the ruin of Top Withens. What do we got? O Lord, how manifold are thy works. Oh, it's been filled in. Wisdom hast thou made them all. The earth is full of thy riches. A little bit random, without more context. So this is Brontë Falls. I mean, of course, to the Brontës, this was just a local waterfall. Top Withens. Huh? Arashi got Oka. What else have we got? Haworth, the Brontë Way. Top Withens. Is this like a transliterated version of Top Withens in another language, maybe? On the other signposts, it's actually engraved in a different language. I'll show you the route I'm following today as well. It's not a huge distance. A lot of people would start this walk from Haworth itself, but I've started just up from the nearby reservoir. Yeah, this is what I'm used to seeing on the signposts, but I've never seen that before. Yeah, it did sound like farming at that time, and in this area in particular, was a particularly big challenge. During the Brontes' time, the main produce of the farms here would have been dairy, but they'd have been doing whatever they could to bring in more money. And many farmhouses eventually had an upstairs space for weaving, in a room back then referred to as the weaving chamber. Now I think I can see the ruins from here. It's going to be a very pixelated, zoomed in shot for you. I've never been here before, but the pictures I've seen online whilst doing my research, they show the ruins next to just a tree sitting in solitude all by itself. And there's one up there on the hilltop. I've got to wonder if that's it. Okay, let's carry on. Let's get ourselves to this ruin. I'll show you what the plaque says once we get there, and you'll probably spot a feature within the ruins that you won't see on many others. Let's go and check it out. Getting closer. Here we go, Top Withens. We'll come back to that. I believe the only surviving of the 3 original Withens farmhouses. Now, as it happens, the last and most recent resident who lived in Top Withens moved out 100 years ago in 1926. Oh, and here we've got the plaque. Top Withens. This farmhouse has been associated with Wuthering Heights, the Earnshaw home in Emily Bronte's novel. The buildings, even when complete, bore no resemblance to the house she described, but the situation may have been in her mind when she wrote of the moorland setting of the Heights. This plaque has been placed here in response to many inquiries, I bet. Now Ernest, this final resident of Top Withens, apparently, as the story goes, was gassed during World War I. He used to live in Haworth, and following on from the war, it was advised that he find somewhere to live in the countryside. Now's your chance for a pause if you want some extra details. And so this is where Ernest came to live, up until exactly 100 years ago. This is kind of curious. Now, have you spotted yet this kind of unique characteristic? There's something that at least I haven't seen and don't often see when I visit any kind of ruins, to be honest. And it's, for example, this pointed brickwork. Not the only thing that's been done here, but there is quite a bit of it. Because this ruins had a bit of a journey of its own over the last 100 years. It's passed through different owners, collapsed to varying states, apparently been victimized by vandals, and there are even accusations that in the past some tourists came here and stole some of the stone to take home as a memento. Don't know if that's true or not, but maybe. And most recently, it's been not... Is repaired the right word? Preserved? I don't think anything's been rebuilt, but there's been some work done to, I guess, prevent it from falling into further ruin. And to preserve it as this place of historic and cultural value. And I'll give you some tips and information in a moment on how you can visit here for yourself if you wish to. But I have to ask as well, because I'm curious to know, what do you think about the claims, about the whole story? I'll put some extra shots of the information boards on screen for anybody who wants to have a look. It's a place I can easily recommend visiting. The landscape here is incredible enough as it is and worth an explore. But the fact that it's attached to such an iconic piece of cultural and literary history just gives it so much more. And even just on the various footpaths around here, you're constantly passing collapsed walls, historic farmhouse ruins. And if you do wish to visit Top Withens for yourself, in terms of public footpaths, it's pretty accessible. There are several different routes here. If you have a look on OS Maps, we'll see various footpaths that lead to this destination. I've taken one of the shorter routes today, only 2.8 miles. If you want to walk all the way from Haworth, which I would recommend, I think you're more talking 3 to 4 miles. And as always, if you want a mega trip, you can plot this as one stop on part of a huge excursion. We've got very long routes here, such as the Brontë Way and the Pennine Way. So there are lots of options. Now, if you don't fancy walking, or you're unable to, Haworth, the village nearby, is pretty accessible. You can get the train there, the bus there, you can drive there. You can even get a steam train there if you want to. So for some people, that might be a preferable option. And that's going to be everything from our Brontë adventure today. Hope you've enjoyed it. Let us know if you have any questions or more information to add. There's always more to the story of the Brontës. So if you're interested in a further episode, let me know. Brontë wasn't even their father's original name, for example. But we can't go into that now. Either way though, more adventures on the way soon, and fingers crossed, I'll see you on the next one.